friends, and welcome back to our regular format here on Stand Up, the daily podcast supported by listeners like you. I'm your host, Pete Dominic, broadcasting from my home studio in a lovely little town on the very cold shores of the Palisades here on the Hudson River in New York State. Joining me today, it's constitutional law scholar and show favorite Eric Segall, who's just back from a family vacation to Italy, and he's sharing his thoughts from his latest blog post about religion's role in society and our lives. It's called Reflections from Italy on Law, Faith, and Morality. If you want to skip to that conversation with Eric, it's great. It's about 75 minutes long, and I think you'll like it a lot if you want to tear down the patriarchy like us. And it starts at about 47 minutes into today's show. After your headlines and clips, as well as the good stuff, the new segment I'm going to try to consistently produce. I think if it's good enough quality, I don't know. I don't know if I can be consistent enough, but I'm really trying because it helps me and I know it helps a lot of other people. I've gotten great feedback on it. But that starts off the show and your day with something positive, uplifting, inspiring, maybe funny. In this time of great uncertainty and heightened fears, I like to start my podcast that way. Gives you something to wake up to for those of you that press play right when you get up in the morning. So that is coming up. But if you want to skip to headlines and news clips, I start that at 14 minutes in. Let's get to that good stuff right now. Okay. I hope that you're well. I hope to see you at tonight's hangout. That's good stuff. I'm looking forward to catching up with you, hearing your thoughts on the world and life. We always have a great time at our virtual happy hour hangouts at 8 p.m. East tonight, because Taint Week is over and we are settling into 2025, trying to figure out who we want to be, what we're going to be. We've got this winter storm bearing down on over 63 million Americans. So let's find those bright spots, shall we? One of the bright spots for me, by the way, is nature. I mean, getting nature. That's a bright spot for me almost every day. No matter the weather, I try to get outside. I don't always, but I love to include a daily shot of nature photo with no man-made objects included into the subscriber email. So that's always good stuff. Last week I mentioned I'm short on my supply of vitamin N. I encourage people to get out, even if it's freezing. Many of you answered the call, so thank you very much for that. Keep those hashtag vitamin N shots coming. Send them standupwithpete@gmail.com, and I'll share them with our larger community in the daily email. That's good stuff to begin your day with. If you're not a subscriber, patreon.com/Pete Dominic right now. Get that daily shot of vitamin N. I love it. Keep them coming. All right. Well, it is January and it's not just another month. It's a blank canvas bursting with possibility. I think I read that somewhere. So that's kind of how I feel. I hope that you are taking stock of all things and thinking about what you might want to change. I certainly am, always evaluating and reevaluating. It's a good time of year to do that, but have compassion for yourself if you're unable to accomplish the goals that you set at the beginning of the year. At the hangout the other day, we were talking about how somebody suggested that they like to set their goals, I think it was Rosalind, at her birthday. I do that as well for the upcoming year. But whatever January means to you, I hope that you can treat it like a blank canvas here at the beginning of the month, at the beginning of 2025. I'm just so happy to be here along with you for the ride. How about this for some good stuff? Never a bad time to read a little Robert Frost, and I thought stopping by woods on a snowy evening would be welcome if read by my talented performance. Here it is. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Ooh, love me some Robert Frost, huh? Love it. And here's a little more. Dust of Snow by Frost, very short one. The way a crow shook down on me, the dust of snow from a hemlock tree, has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of a day I had rued. Ooh, I like that as well. Yeah, just any small moment, especially some kind of connection or happenstance in nature, could sometimes be a day changer, a game changer, if you will. All right, a little bit of poetry to get us started here on a January Monday. And I love the great speeches that are made at the award shows. Last night was the Golden Globes, but I think one of my all-time favorites was Jim Carrey in 2016. His speech. I thought this was great, so I wanted to actually replay that one. I don't know if there were any great ones. I haven't looked yet, but here's Jim Carrey, who I absolutely adore.
From the upcoming film True Crimes, please welcome two-time Golden Globe winner, Jim Carrey.
Thank you. I am two-time Golden Globe winner, Jim Carrey. You know, when I go to sleep at night, I'm not just a guy going to sleep. I'm two-time Golden Globe winner, Jim Carrey, going to get some well-needed shut-eye. And when I dream, I don't just dream any old dream. No, sir. I dream about being three-time Golden Globe winning actor Jim Carrey. Because then I would be enough. It would finally be true. And I could stop this terrible search for what I know ultimately won't fulfill me. But these are important, these awards. I don't want you to think that just because if you blew up our solar system alone, you wouldn't be able to find us or any of human history with the naked eye. But from our perspective, this is huge. One more time, here are the nominees for Best Motion Picture Comedy.
I just love that. I think the perspective that Carrey brings during that brief speech is great. Later on, I'll play some of comedian and host of the Golden Globes, Nikki Glaser, who I thought was very funny. I'll end the news clips with that because we need a laugh after we hear all of that nonsense I'm going to play for you as well. All right, here's some more good stuff, though. This is from the great show CBS Sunday Morning. It's Sunday morning correspondent Faith Salie talking about how to stay present in our lives as time marches on. Take it away, Jane Pauley.
Resolved in 2025. Keep those resolutions. That's Faith Salie's plan.
I don't make explicit resolutions anymore. I have vague wishes that this may be the year I'll meditate or return to my college-level French or finally read Moby Dick, call my dad more. But as I watch my children grow, for children are the real markers of a year flying by, suddenly my son is almost eye to eye with me and my daughter can wear my shoes. Suddenly, I'm the exact age my mother was when she left this earth. And all I want is more time. If I could resolve to make more time, I would. So I do the thing that comforts me. I go to the dictionary. And I learned the root of resolution is Latin, resolvere, which means loosen, undo, release. Who knew? Resolvere sounds gentle and just what I need, and maybe you do too. Maybe this new year can be a loosening. My beloved Aunt Judy died last year, and what I wanted to keep of hers was one of her prayer cards from her knitting circle. She was Catholic from Boston and used to curse by saying things like, "Sweet Redeemer." And this card calls the Blessed Virgin Mary Our Lady, Undoer of Knots. And it asks for help in release from entanglements and for faith in the unfurling ribbon of our lives. That is my resolution for myself. And perhaps it speaks to you. To undo knots. To allow our most contorted, intractable positions to stretch. To be willing to see things differently, which may allow us to see things we've never seen before. To be so present now that we loosen our grip on the past and our white knuckles about the future. And perhaps that is how we make time slow down, even just a little.
Not bad. Not bad. I like it. There you go. See? It got a little religious there, but I didn't mind what she was trying to say. So here's one more from CBS this morning. This is the great John Dickerson talking to New York Times bestselling author James Clear, who offers a roadmap to lifestyle change in his book, which is a huge bestseller, Atomic Habits. Take it away, John Dickerson.
Atomic Habits, an easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones. He's here to help us make resolutions that will last. James Clear, good morning and Happy New Year to you.
Good morning.
Let me start with the key. What is the key to making a good New Year's resolution?
Well, most of the time when people make a New Year's resolution, they're essentially making a goal for themselves, right? The thought is, okay, I want different outcomes this year. I want to lose weight, or I want to meditate more, reduce stress. I want to be more productive. But I think actually the typical New Year's resolution focuses on the wrong thing. What I mean by that is we think the outcome is the thing that needs to change, but actually it's the habits or the system, the process behind the outcome. So, for example, if you have a messy room, you look around the room and you think, oh, this is so cluttered, I need a clean room. But if you get motivated and clean the room for an hour, you have a clean room for now, but if you don't change the sloppy, messy, pack rat habits that led to a dirty room in the first place, then you end up in the same place. And it's similar with New Year's resolutions. We think what I need is to feel less stress, or what I need is to have a written book, or what I need is to lose weight. But actually what we really need are the habits and the systems behind those things.
Yes, I won't ask you about to have a written book, which is a little bit too personal to me. But if it's clean the room, let's say, or lose weight, how then do I wire my life with good habits?
So I think the first thing to focus on is not the outcome that you want, but the type of person you want to become. So if you take losing weight, a lot of people may say, oh, I want to lose 40 pounds or something like that. But the question to ask is, who is the type of person that could lose weight? Well, maybe it's the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. And so your New Year's resolution becomes not to lose a certain amount of weight or to achieve a particular goal, but to be a certain type of person. And this is where I think small habits are so useful, because even if doing something like 5 push-ups is not enough to transform your body overnight, it is enough to cast a vote for being that kind of person, for being a fit person. And so in a sense, it's like every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you believe that you are. And so the first task is to start casting votes for that new identity, and then worry about ramping up the intensity later.
And is the key word there action? You're giving yourself an action item, whereas clean the room or be a clean person or be a thin person, those are gargantuan big things. Making an action.
So you translate that identity that you're looking to build into a small action, a small vote that you can take. So, things like doing 5 push-ups, writing 1 sentence, meditating for 60 seconds. These don't sound like ambitious New Year's resolutions, but all of them cast a vote for being a fit person or becoming a writer or being a meditator. And ultimately, when you get to the end of the year, what you want is not to have a particular result, but to look at yourself in a new way.
All right. We'll vote not just in November, but with our actions. James Clear, thanks so much.
All right, there you go. I thought that was great. I like that book. I've looked at it. I got to get it. Maybe I'll interview him. James Clear, Atomic Habits, an easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones. Well, I hope you don't mind my sharing advice on resolutions and January-related good stuff. I hope you like it, and I'll keep doing it because it helps me as well. I love learning this stuff along with you each and every day here on the podcast. All right, that's all I've got for your helping of the good stuff on today's podcast. Tell your friends to start your day with the good stuff on standupwithpete.com. All right, now it's time to get to headlines. I'm going to try something a little bit different this week as I read them all at once and then go in depth on the ones I think are most important by reading a little bit of it to you. So let me know how this sounds. Here we go. Over 63 million of us Americans are in the path of a major winter storm. It's being called the Blair. Yet Earth reached its warmest year on record in 2024, according to the European Union. President Biden awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom to 18 people, pissing off the loudest assholes on the right. The country continues to mourn and remember President Jimmy Carter this week. We are, of course, learning more about the former veteran who committed mass murder by plowing through people on Bourbon Street, as well as the active duty military guy who killed himself in front of a Trump Tower in a rented Cybertruck. The House reelected House Speaker and Christian nationalist Mike Johnson, who says he wants to pass Trump's whole nightmarish agenda in one fell swoop. Trump, for himself, had dinner with Prime Minister of Italy at his garish for a ghoul venue, Mar-a-Lago in Florida. The president-elect is also a convicted felon, don't forget. He learned he'd be sentenced on January 10th in New York just 10 days before he's sworn in to be president of the United States, so that's totally normsies. U.S. unemployment claims fell to the lowest level since March, setting Trump and Republicans up to take credit for the success they did vote against. An appeals court struck down federal net neutrality rules. That's a big deal. Kenyan officials are investigating the origin of a half-ton piece of space junk that crashed in a remote village. And this very important story, Chick-fil-A has changed their waffle fries and customers are none too happy. Quote, whatever you have done, undo it. Fast food giant recently announced it made a slight adjustment to its fries recipe to make them stay crisper, longer, and, well, people don't like it. Oh, and yesterday was football and, of course, the Golden Globe Awards, neither of which I have any coverage for. All right, now let me go in depth on just a couple of those stories that I think are really very important. Obviously, the storm is pretty bad and cold, and I hope you have heat and everything is working. I wouldn't know what it's like to not have that. I mean, that's always a good reason to have an electric blanket if your electric works, right? But I do think this story about the thin GOP majority reconciliation bill they're planning to attempt is going to be a major challenge. But that's the story yesterday, and I think this is from Washington Post, where they write, newly reelected Speaker Mike Johnson told House Republicans during a closed-door policy retreat on Saturday that President-elect Donald Trump wants Congress to pass one sweeping bill full of his priorities through the budget reconciliation process. Johnson said Trump wants to pass one big, beautiful bill. Sounds like something he would say, according to sources. House Republicans are meeting privately at Fort McNair over the weekend to map their legislative strategy under Trump's presidency for taxes, the border, and energy, among other policy areas. Trump's desire to have one bill instead of two is a break from what Senate Majority Leader John Thune has laid out in his plan, which includes two separate packages. So now that they have the House, the Senate, and the White House, Republicans will have the ability to attempt to implement major policy changes without any Democratic support using this procedural tool called budget reconciliation, which only requires a simple majority of votes to pass the chamber. But the razor-thin GOP majority in the House means a reconciliation package will also be a real major challenge to pass. The House Freedom Caucus has endorsed a two-step plan rather than Trump's single bill, and the group of hardliners may stand in the way of Trump's desires. Well, we will see. But on Friday, several members of the House Freedom Caucus nearly stopped Mike Johnson from getting selected as Speaker on the first round. Were you paying any attention to that? Most of them ultimately voted for Johnson to get the 218 votes needed to be elected. But this legislation has passed via budget reconciliation, which will allow the Senate to avert the 60-vote threshold from the filibuster. It would need a consensus amongst House Republicans with their majority of 219 to 215 Democrats. If they wish to pass legislation without any Democratic support, they can only have one GOP defection if all members of the House are present. The single bill Trump favors through reconciliation would put the GOP caucus to the test. So we're going to pay close attention to that. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about that, but I wanted to just get you read in on it a little bit more. Also, I've been reading a lot about the guy who is a member of the Army's elite Green Beret who died in the explosion at the Tesla Cybertruck that he packed with explosives outside Trump's Las Vegas hotel. So he's active duty U.S. Army soldier, which is really important. And Josh Marshall over at Talking Points Memo wrote something interesting about it. He said, over the last 4 days, the bizarre Cybertruck fire outside a Trump hotel in Las Vegas has run from comical interlude to possible terrorist incident to tragic suicide of another veteran of America's forever wars. Each of these descriptions still captures an important part of the story. As I noted yesterday, names the guy who did it. I won't use his name. Green Beret appears to have had a series of combustible and likely abusive relationships going back many years. He also appears to have suffered from PTSD, possibly a traumatic brain injury since returning from a tour in 2019. But at least for the moment, there seems to be a striking lack of attention to the political motives that he expressed in at least two documents, or what I guess we might call manifestos, that investigators found on his phone. So that's the first point that Josh Marshall's making, is that nobody's talking about this guy and his manifestos and what he said. The documents denounce Democrats, demand that they be, quote, culled from Washington by violence if necessary, and express the hope that his own death will serve as kind of a bell clap for national rebirth of masculinity under the leadership of Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Bobby Kennedy Jr. Did you miss that stuff? Did you miss that coverage? Yeah, me too, Josh Marshall writes. Most headlines I've seen in the news report only that he warned of national decline and bore no ill will toward Mr. Trump. In the words of one of the investigators, it glosses over that Donald Trump is, shall we say, a bit of an understatement, as you can see in the excerpts. And he includes the excerpts that this guy in his manifesto wrote, where he says, stop obsessing over diversity. We're all diverse, and DEI is a cancer. Thankfully, we rejected the DEI candidate, and we'll have a real president instead of Weekend at Bernie. So he's a big, big Trump supporter, this Green Beret. And I just think it's really interesting what Josh Marshall writes about it when he says that I should note that they capture the manifestos, what we call the ideologically polyglot, or what appears to many of us as ideology polyglot, thinking of many of these people. He also rails against the 1%, excessive screen time for kids, wars with no strategic purpose, obesity. We should also note explicitly that he can both be a violent extremist and a victim of PTSD. And in a broader sense, part of human collateral damage of the wars that occupied the U.S. military through the first 2 decades of the 21st century. Our minds should be big enough for both of those realities. But the through line is pretty clear. If you're a Democrat or someone who is Democrat coded, this guy's version of a national rebirth probably isn't a fun one for you. And Marshall wraps up by saying, at least when I looked last night, the only places I saw parts of his writings in any detail were relatively obscure publications. I was worried that maybe they were hoax documents that had somehow found their way into a few publications, so I traced them back to yesterday's police press conference. They are indeed real. As a final point, let me return to the question we've discussed over the last few days. What was the political message of torching a Cybertruck in front of a Trump hotel? He actually answered that more or less clearly in the second manifesto. Quote, this was not a terrorist attack. It was a wake-up call. Americans only pay attention to spectacles and violence. What better way to get my point across than a stunt in fireworks and explosives? One might quibble over whether it was a terrorist attack, but I will give him his due in so much as he does not appear to have intended to injure others, or at least in the vicinity of the Trump venue. He's pretty clear. Making something go boom around Big Trump and Musk identifiers would get everyone's attention, as indeed it did. So that is Josh Marshall's analysis of the lack of coverage of this and more about the motivations of it as well. And those are the two stories that I wanted to go more in depth in. I want to talk with somebody about this net neutrality rules being suspended. If you think that's an important issue, you know something about that, reach out to me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Those are your headlines. Let me know what I should have included and what I should go a little bit more in depth on. Always looking for the undercovered stories as well as any story that impacts a large group of people. All right. So those are headlines. Now it's time to get to today's clips. I've got a potpourri of clips for you today, including reactions to Mike Johnson being reelected to Speaker of the House. Here is what the minority leader, who lost by just a couple of votes himself, and maybe the future Speaker of the House, Hakeem Jeffries, had to say about what Democrats' agenda is.
Our position is that it is not acceptable to cut Social Security, cut Medicare, cut Medicaid, cut veterans' benefits, or cut nutritional assistance from children and families in order to pay for massive tax breaks for billionaires and wealthy corporations. House Democrats.
All right, here is Republican House extremist Andy Biggs, one of the most extreme conspiracy theorist awfuls of them all, trying to tell folks watching Fox News that, to restart the economy, it's pretty much still on fire. They just need more tax cuts for rich people, and somehow people still buy this bullshit. But here it is.
Is that because I do agree with Representative Gingrich, Speaker Gingrich, you have got to get the tax package done as early as possible because that will be this kickstarter to the economy, and that's what saves the rest of the administration for the next 2 years after that. But
all right, there you go. There's Andy Biggs. Yeah, Kickstarter. That's what we need is tax cuts. Now here is dum-dum Chip Roy, who put it all on the line, constantly embarrassing himself, the probably most perfectionist purveyor of false anger and rage of them all. Here he is talking about how, he's given Trump a second chance by giving Mike Johnson a second chance and carrying out Trump's orders?
Well, the reservations are we spent close to $3 trillion last year with more Democrat votes than Republican votes. We had multiple bills that were passed with a majority, lacking a majority of Republican votes. We saw what unfolded with a promise to say that we would secure the border of the United States before we funded Ukraine. Those were all failures. But that's looking in the rearview mirror. Today's a new day. It's 2025. The president asked us to get behind Mike Johnson. We did. It is now Mike Johnson's house to deliver. It is now Mike Johnson's job to deliver on the president's agenda. We will back him as long as we're delivering on that agenda. And so that is what we need to do right now, is come together to do that. We've got to stop spending money we don't have and racking up deficits. We've got to secure the border. We've got to get rid of the bureaucrats. We've got to make our country strong again. There can be no room for doubt here. We've got to have leadership to get that done. And that's why today's vote, that's why there were 9 people who withheld their votes. It sends a message that we're going to be watching that.
All right, and here's a little bit of insanity. I thought maybe I shouldn't pick this clip because there's a lot of crosstalk and it's just dumb. But Jessica Tarlov on Fox's The Five trying to point out the statistics in American terrorism and who is committing the majority of the terrorism so that we can kind of analyze the threat matrix and figure out how to stop certain ideologies from spreading, certain people getting access to weapons, et cetera, and so on. It's an important conversation, but certainly the folks on the right have never wanted to admit that we have an issue even with right-wing, white, anti-government, Christian nationalist extremism, however you want to name it. But here it is, and it's just a couple of minutes. I thought, I'll play it. What the hell? He's trying to make the argument and help people understand, so it's worth it.
But the reason that President Biden and the administration and Christopher Wray, who was a Trump appointee, have been talking about the threat of right-wingers and far right-wing supremacy, whatever you want to call it, is because that's what the numbers bear out. And we put up all those numbers about how many people had been killed by jihadists, but it's not as many as those who have been killed by white supremacists. So the New America Foundation has done a breakdown in terrorist attacks since 9/11. It goes through 2023. We have to add the 2024 numbers once they're available. But you have 134 killed by far right-wingers, 107 killed by jihadists, 17 killed by misogynists or incels, 13 killed by black separatists or nationalists, and 1 killed by
killed by gang members. Yeah. I mean, that's got to be on the list.
Okay,
that's a phenomenal
by
number.
illegals. You know, let's add to the list.
Those are
I wonder how many of those killed by white supremacists were killed in prison.
Yeah. That's by suicide. I mean, because oftentimes they...
How many people fell off an ice cream truck?
You brought the numbers up. I mean, you're countering the numbers that are very obvious.
No, well, we're not.
From
First
terrorist
of all,
attacks.
Yes, they have their definition of a terrorist attack. They have the ideologies behind these terror attacks. I am not here to minimize any... You do know? Great. We'll tell the rest of the table.
I don't think you're minimizing it,
I'm just saying that the numbers don't, but it does.
I don't think the argument holds.
Okay, then you should speak to the New America Foundation.
I don't think the numbers are accurate.
Well, what numbers do you
first
have
of all,
you're
talking about post 9/11.
Right.
I mean, the numbers that we have is, first of all, is 2015 in terms of ISIS. These are the only numbers that we have collected. You want to go back to 2011? We can go back to that number.
Well, I want to go
I mean, none of what she just said, none of what that lady just said made any sense. I couldn't even follow what she was saying. She's like, if we go to this year, we have that. We don't have those numbers. Well, your numbers are phony. I think everybody, if you pay any attention to news and the motivations behind so many of these attacks and who are committing them, you know who the greatest threats are. And by the way, it's harder to stop a domestic American. It's harder to stop a white guy who doesn't have any criminal background. And it's hard to even confront some of these guys that are active in former military. It's politically incorrect to even talk about it. So, you know, if you blend in, if you're assimilated, if you have access to guns and you know people because you're from here and you grew up here, you're harder to stop. I think it's fair to say without any passion at all. I think that's the analysis, or at least it should be. All right. Well, here now is the man who may potentially be the next Secretary of Defense, one of the most powerful people in the world. He's a real disgusting guy in all the ways that a person can be grotesque in terms of how he treats women, as well as what he thinks about, in this case, civilians in areas of conflict. Here's Pete Hegseth, this is from a few years back, saying sometimes you got to kill civilians, which is, by the way, just not an argument very often made by anybody in leadership. They try to talk around it, rename it collateral damage and so on. He's just outward and openly saying, listen, sometimes civilians got to die. This guy is so terrible. But again, people should have to hear this. People should know it. People should call their senators and say, this guy cannot be confirmed for this position. It looks like he may be.
And so what I do take issue with is the way people characterize Ted Cruz and Donald Trump's, whether it's carpet bombing or the willingness to handcuff the enemy, is their focus is on doing whatever it takes to destroy the Islamic State, not we want to find a way to kill civilians. So carpet bombing is not target civilians. Carpet bombing is if we know where the headquarters of ISIS is in Raqqa, then we're going to bomb it, even if there happen to be some homes nearby. Or when we're looking at the fuel trucks leaving to head to Turkey to sell on the black market, we're not going to bomb them with leaflets because we think the drivers are civilian casualties. We're going to bomb the oil trucks. So I think it's a difference of disposition for sure.
All right, just absolutely reprehensible guy. Terrible, terrible guy. But you know who I like? I like James McGovern. Let's bounce back with some great rhetoric from the floor of the House. He always takes it to Republicans and calls them out on all of their bullshit, and very few people do it better than the congressman from Massachusetts' 2nd District, who I really should get back on this show. I used to talk to him all the time. Here he is, talking about the deals that were made behind closed doors to get Christian nationalists and man who looks and sounds like a Simpsons character, Mike Johnson, reelected as Speaker.
And speaking of back rooms, the only reason Speaker Johnson got enough votes is because 2 members emerged from a back room after huddling with the Speaker and changed their votes to support him. God only knows what they were promised in order to cave to change their views. Waiting around for Republicans to fight with each other instead of fighting for the American people. They spent weeks wasting taxpayer time and money because they couldn't elect a speaker, not once, but twice. Weeks wasted where Congress didn't do a damn thing. And now they have the nerve to lecture people about government efficiency? Come on, get real. How many times last Congress did they just send everyone home because they couldn't even pass their own bills? How many times did they miss their own deadlines? And when anything did get done, it was Democrats who stepped up to get it done. Hands down, Republicans ran the most ineffective, incompetent, and chaotic Congress in history.
All right, a little bit more from James McGovern, calling out the preposterous notion that Republicans are claiming they have a mandate in Congress.
Mr. Speaker, I first want to take issue with the word choice of the gentlelady from Minnesota who kept on talking about a mandate, Republican mandate. Where's the mandate? Is it in the room with us? Maybe it's hiding under the table. But the last time I checked, Republicans actually lost seats in the House of Representatives. Republicans now have the slimmest majority in nearly 100 years. So, one would think, given the closeness of the election, that we would hear more about the importance of working together and bipartisanship. But you'd be wrong. And that's reflected in this rules package.
All right. There you go. James McGovern on the House floor, loving it. And I mentioned in the headlines there that the Prime Minister of Italy was in Mar-a-Lago over the weekend. But what I didn't mention was that there's a new documentary called The Eastman Dilemma, Lawfare or Justice, about John Eastman, who, of course, is facing charges in both Georgia and Arizona in connection with alleged schemes to overturn the 2020 election. Like, these guys, bad news, right? Well, Simone Sanders Townsend on MSNBC completely denounced the event at the film. So all these people were down there celebrating this film, this premiere, because Trump continues to try to rewrite history. So there was a screening of the Eastman Dilemma, and all these people were there. I didn't realize that until watching this commentary by Simone Sanders Townsend, which I'm going to play a couple of minutes. I think it's important.
New this morning, Donald Trump hosted a party at Mar-a-Lago last night. And that's not the news. The news is that the party was celebrating his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The guest list included several key players in those efforts, like Rudy Giuliani and Michael Flynn. Italy's conservative Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was also there. They all gathered to celebrate John Eastman, who advised Trump in 2020 that Vice President Mike Pence had the power to unilaterally discard official electoral votes during the congressional certification process. In a video posted online, apparently taken from the audience, Trump sang Eastman's praises, insisting Eastman was, quote, right the whole time. tomorrow will mark 4 years since Trump's conspiracy led thousands of pro-Trump extremists to storm the United States Capitol. Fortunately for Trump, Vice President Kamala Harris doesn't share his value set. Tomorrow, she will preside over the certification of Donald Trump's victory. Harris will protect the tradition of peaceful transfers of power as Donald Trump celebrates efforts to destroy it.
Well, it sounds like another fun weekend at Mar-a-Lago. I'm so sorry that I missed that screening celebrating John Eastman. I'm sure it's a great documentary. It'll win a lot of awards. All right, well, I thought this was interesting. Lieutenant General retired Honore is, I think, his name. He wrote this New York Times opinion piece titled "Elon Musk is a National Security Risk," and he was on CNN, so I thought I'd play a little bit of what he has to say.
Well, thank you for having me on as we pay tribute to President Carter, a farm boy like myself who's spent his entire adult life in public service. And I'm here tonight as a retired public servant, still interested in the security of our country. And in this case, 80% of U.S. rockets that are launched now are launched by Mr. Musk's company, SpaceX. At the same time, Mrs. Musk has close ties with the Chinese government. They loaned him $1.4 billion to build a Tesla plant. And in the Chinese law, they have a rule that anybody doing business in China is required to provide intelligence to the Chinese government, which is led by the Chinese Communist Party. That is a big concern. That should be a concern to our government. And I'm surprised the U.S. government that's in office now hasn't done something sooner to publicly investigate this, or the Congress or the Senate. And I'm much disappointed that has not happened.
So Musk and Trump's transition team have not responded to CNN's request for a comment. We should note that Musk has a security clearance now, and there's no federal agency that has accused Musk of improperly sharing intelligence. And Musk himself has implied he paid off a reported $1.4 billion loan that you had mentioned from several Chinese government-controlled banks for Tesla back in 2021. So why do you think that's still a factor in how the Chinese government officials might leverage those financial ties?
Well, I'm not the only one. There's some pretty significant people that's in the government about to go into President-elect Trump's government, Vivek Ramaswamy and Senator Marco Rubio has raised this question as early as May, that this is a serious concern, Musk's ties to the Chinese Communist Party and doing business there and his relationship, as well as in recent weeks, Steve Bannon, a very loud-spoken and influential person in the Make America Great Again movement, has spoken to his concerns about Musk's relationship to the Chinese. Musk also has relationship, he's quoted as communicating with President Putin in Russia. When we have government officials do that, those calls are recorded and synchronized with the Department of State and the national. He's a private citizen who also owns a social media network that can influence what senators get elected in that. So he has a lot of power, but not political position. So there are people, I'm not the only one, and there are people of greater stature than I that's in the government that could and should be thinking about this, as well as great news media organizations like CNN has reported Musk's relationship with the president of China when he was recently elected and congratulating him. So he has a very strong relationship with two of our adversaries or competitors.
Well, there you go. Making the case that Elon Musk is a national security risk. He makes a lot of very good points, so I wanted to share that with you. I thought that was real interesting. A man of his stature and respect and credibility making that point in the New York Times, CNN, and anywhere else we'll talk to him. All right, now let's go to the new Senate Majority Leader. It's John Thune, a farm state senator who knows that the ag industry has big problems if undocumented workers are deported, but still, this is how he handled it on MSNBC, or rather Meet the Press yesterday.
Incredibly complicated. You need 24 more times ICE detention capacity just to deport 1 million people in 1 year, not to mention more agents, more judges. judges, more planes for deportation. In 2016, you actually said deporting everyone here legally wasn't realistic. Have you changed your mind about that? Do you think it's realistic?
I think you've got... Again, I think you start, and I think this is going to be obviously a process, and it's going to take resources. Obviously, to get people, to leave the country, we're going to have to make sure the administration has the resources they need to enable them to do that. Is it realistic to deport everybody? I mean, there's a lot of people in this country who are here illegally. But I think they have identified already, and I said anybody who has committed a crime in this country clearly ought to be on that list. And there are a bunch of folks that over 1 million, 1.4 million, I think, on the current administration's list of people that need to be deported. So start with that.
Okay, we'll start with that. We'll see how that goes, John Thune, because it's not going to go well. And here is a senator from Louisiana. This is Bill Cassidy. He's a Republican, and he disagrees with RFK Jr. on vaccines. So I thought that was good to hear. This is from Fox News Sunday.
RFK Jr. faring among Democrats on your committee?
I haven't spoken to him about it. I just don't know. I will meet with him this coming week. I look forward to the interview. I agree with him on some things and disagree on others. The food safety, I think the ultra-processed food is a problem. Vaccinations, he's wrong on. And so I just look forward to having a good dialogue with him on that.
Okay.
Well, it's good to hear a Republican senator say that on Fox News, so I like to hear that. Here's Margaret Brennan, the CBS host of Face the Nation, talking to the head thug in charge of deportations. It's Tom Homan. I think he's going to be, what is he, a DHS?
Can you help us understand what the plan is? A number of industries in this country hire undocumented workers because they are cheap labor. On day one, are you going to restart raids on work sites, on construction sites?
The President Trump's been clear, as I've been clear from day one, that President is going to concentrate on public safety threats and national security threats. And have you heard from your previous segments, we have a huge national security issue in this country. The southwest border has become the biggest national security vulnerability we've seen in this nation. FBI Director Wray agrees with me. We know there's people in this country who pose a national security threat. They've arrested a record number of people on the terrorist watch list, a 3,500% increase in people on the terrorist watch list being arrested at the border. We got over 2 million known gotaways. We know 2 million people crossed the border, weren't arrested, weren't vetted, weren't finished.
All right, so we'll say it's just going to be the bad ones, right? Yeah, just the bad ones. Margaret Brennan also spoke with Nancy Pelosi. She talked about that screening of that documentary yesterday, and this is what she had to say.
Was screening a documentary about the 2020 election, claiming his win and trying to talk about the legal challenges he had. There seems to be a continued effort to claim that he won in 2020.
It's really sad. It really is sad. And I don't know about the film that he had and the rest, but it's almost sick that he would be thinking that in 2020. He's won the election now. Mm-hmm. That will be clear. That will be clear. And tomorrow he will be clearly we will be accepting the results of the Electoral College. So he should be triumphant about that. But to be still trying to fight a fight that he knows he lost is really sad.
Indeed it is. Well said, Nancy Pelosi on MSNBC yesterday. And those are all of the news clips I've got for you. The comedy comes from the host of the Golden Globes last night, my old friend Nikki Glaser. Crushed it in her opening. So let's listen to a little of that, shall we?
Good evening and welcome to the 82nd Golden Globes, Ozempic's biggest night. If you're watching on CBS, hello. If you're watching on Paramount Plus, you have 6 days left to cancel your free trial. I'm Nikki Glaser, and I am absolutely thrilled to be your host tonight. Thank you. And I gotta say, this feels like I finally made it. You know, I'm in a room full of producers at the Beverly Hilton Hotel, and this time all of my clothes are on. So, yeah, it was worth it. Now, some of you may know me me as a stand-up comedian and from my appearances on Roast, but I am not here to roast you tonight. I want you to know that. And how could I, really? You're all so famous, so talented, so powerful. I mean, you could really do anything. I mean, except tell the country who to vote for. But it's okay. You'll get them next time, if there is one. I'm scared. Ariana, hold my finger. Thank you. Thank you. Well, tonight we celebrate the best of film and hold space for television. Yes. Wicked, queer, night bitch. These are not just words Ben Affleck yells after he orgasms. These are some of the incredible movies nominated tonight. The Bear, The Penguin, Baby Reindeer. These are not just things found in RFK's freezer. These are TV shows nominated tonight. And what a night. I look out and I see some of the hardest working actors in show business. And by that, I mean your servers. Yes. Yes, give it up.
Yeah.
They'll be bringing you your cocktails to drink and your food that you'll look at. But I also see some absolute Hollywood legends. I mean, we have got some huge movie stars here tonight. Kate Winslet is here. Kate Blanchett. Colin Farrell. And let's not forget so many huge TV stars as well. Kate Winslet, Kate Blanchett, Colin Farrell. I mean, even Oscar-winning actor Eddie Redmayne did TV this year. He is nominated for Peacock's The Day of the Jackal. Yes. Yes. It's about a top secret elite sniper that no one can find because he's on Peacock. I think I've seen more actual peacocks in my life than shows on Peacock.
All right. Well, there's a little bit of the beginning of her roast. And if you want to see the rest, you can watch it on YouTube or anywhere else you can find it. So I thought that would be fun to play. Good job, Nikki. And now it's time to get to my guest. Today's guest, it's Eric Segall. It's the inaugural Sundays with Segall. We're going to try to do this every Sunday. We'll probably never do it again, but we love talking, and I thought this was a great set of topics to talk with him about. He had actually reached out to me yesterday and said, hey, I just got back from Italy, and I have thoughts, and he'd written this blog post, so we talked about it. You should find him on Dorf on Law and read everything that they have over there. But this piece is called Reflections from Italy on Law, Faith, and Morality. He and his family just spent 3 days in Florence and 4 in Rome last week. And he says the sights were spectacular, the food stupendous, and the people more than wonderful. My wife also met a close social media friend in person for the first time. We had a wonderful time. We also visited many magnificent churches and places of worship, too many to count, including, of course, the Vatican. We had a fair amount of time to reflect on law, religion, history, and morality. And then he goes on with those reflections. I thought it was really good. We covered a lot. We talked for over an hour, and I hope that you enjoy it. You should follow him on social media, on Blue Sky. Listen to his podcast, which we referenced, Supreme Myths. Get his book, Supreme Myths and Originalism as Faith. And you can see him in PODJAM in Las Vegas. Let's do it right now with our friend, one of our favorites, the Legal Eagle, Eric Segall. All right, there he is. Eric Segall, Sundays with Segall. It's our new segment that we just came up with 30 seconds ago when you told me that, it's actually good, Pete, for me to record timing-wise. Sundays work for me. So I said Sundays with Segall, which is our regular conversation where we talk about legal issues. But we get outside of that. We talk about anything else that we want to. Friendship, parenting, health, culture, life, right? Welcome back.
There'll be silly Sundays, serious Sundays, stupendous Sundays, and sexy Sundays.
Oh, I can't wait for Sexy Sundays between you and I. People are going to really want to hear us talk about sex.
On Sundays.
On Sundays, the Lord.
And you know what it is? It is appropriate for us to be highlighting for the first time in our 1,000 conversations Sundays, given the subject matter we're about to discuss, I think.
That's right, because we're going to talk a little bit of religion, because you just came from a visit to the Vatican. You went all the way to Italy just for the Vatican and returned. That was a weird choice, given some of your criticism of the Catholic Church.
Lynn and myself and Sarah and Kai went to Florence and Italy. Jessie, my oldest, had to work, so she did not. and we had just a spectacular 7 days. I have to say, Pete, we went to France last year for New Year's, and I would have thought Paris would be the place I would say the food was the best I've ever had. But this week of food is the best week of food I've ever had.
Oh, wow.
And Lynn, who people know, is an excellent cook. Lynn was telling me, no, Italy is actually the place for that. I thought France would be the place for that. But the food was...
What was the best thing that you had?
Salmon. Oh, my God. Salmon avocado stuff just mixed together. Oh, my God. You had some Captain Crunch. No, I'm kidding about the Captain Crunch. But salmon and avocado and things like that. Oh, my God. The pasta. I would say the meat was the weakest link, but everything else, and of course the cheese, everything. But Pete, also, before we get into the serious stuff, which we're going to get into, I want to say, every single person we met in Italy was unbelievably helpful and nice.
Yeah.
Every single one. No exceptions. And we had typical Segall technical issues and travel stuff and this and that. And New York, Chicago, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, Boston, LA. It's not like that.
Yeah. Well, the thing I find about Italian culture, which I know a good bit about, I spent a lot of time there, obviously, is that the Italian people are very, very warm to strangers and people they know very little or even work with just a little bit. It's the family that you got to watch out for. They hate each other. We despise each other. We're not close at all. Oh, Italians are all about family. Really? Have you met them? They haven't talked to each other for 20 years because one of them got $20 more in the inheritance and they live a block away.
That's really funny. The other thing that I find currently amusing about Italy, before we get into the serious stuff, is, and I want to mention this is research. I was doing research. Nobody knows what the current status of weed is in the country of Italy. It is the most bizarre thing. It is openly sold in stores, yet illegal. It is apparently legal to sell but not use. It's really complicated, and less than 0.2% of THC or something is fully legal to buy and sell but not to use for some reason. It's all. I found that I asked people about it because I was curious about it, and it was just and it is very similar to America, where, as we've discussed before today, THC is legal in every state in the country, even though you wouldn't think it is. It's interesting.
Every state in the country, even though
the federal government made it legal, basically.
Right. So. Yeah, that's another really interesting detail about Italian culture and their feelings around that and any drugs. But they love themselves some alcohol. Like, no problem with wine. Pour all the wine in the world. Oh, easy with the smokables there, friend.
I have a confession now to make.
Amico.
So Lynn and I, one night, we had the kids, but one night we went off on our own for a little drink. And I don't do a lot of that. I believe the name of my drink was I had monkeys in my pajamas. Mm-hmm. Or something like that.
I got that from a young lady in junior high, as a matter of fact.
All right. You want to talk serious now?
Well, wait, what is that it? That you just want to tell me the name of the drink? That's the end of that story?
It was one of those drinks that has like sugar and other stuff in it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you love the sweetener.
Poor Lynn, who loves herself a good bottle of wine, and even more than that, loves herself gourmet food and a good bottle of wine, is forced to ordering wine by the glass because her husband sucks. And that was sad because we had some really great meals that she couldn't get the wine that she would like. This is a first world problem. But also I was laughed at quite a bit for many of the things that I tried to order in Italy, but we don't have to go there.
Also because you were being you.
Well, I have a thing with tomatoes. So having a thing with tomatoes isn't that easy in Italy.
One of my favorite things, and I hope that we can spend more time together in 2025, like being with you for a full day is something I've done more than once. And the antics and the behavior and the emotions and it really is. It's fun and entertaining and short-lived. Everything is very short-lived. I remember one time we were driving, you were driving the minivan, everybody was in the car, both our families, and there were cyclists on the road, and you screamed.
I did. I was mad.
These arguments, these anti-cyclist arguments. And then like moments later, we shifted and it was just anything else. And your ability to compartmentalize and move on to the next moment is really fun to be around. And that moment,
I hope to be in Vegas. You've invited me. I'm going to be there. And
good point. Great point. Yeah. We're very excited to have you there as well. Just real quick on the trip, you went to Italy.
One more thing about Vegas. Did I mention I'm going to come dressed as Elvis?
Oh yeah. Well, that shouldn't be hard. Are you going to wear some kind of lifts? Stilts?
We've had to have a no height joke rule in my
Put on a fat suit, wear some stilts.
All right, let's move on to Italy.
I just wanted to ask you real quick. Last year, this time of year, you went to Europe. Again, this year, why travel? I thought it was interesting that you guys were taking a trip during this time of year, and I just wonder if there's something I'm missing.
So I have an answer. It's a really boring answer. We were supposed to go to Japan last June, not Christmas, last June.
Yeah.
But I couldn't go because of health. So we had these tickets we had to use. So we decided to do a very quick trip to Paris for New Year's, really quick, like 3 days, which we would never do. We would never pay for that, except we had these expiring tickets we had to use. And we had such a great time with the kids. It was such a wonderful family thing. We had great dinners. We talked about real stuff. The kids were really, they'd never been to, it was just wonderful. So we decided to do it this year again with Rome. And Sarah is going to be a senior next year and college starts. I don't know how much more time we have for these trips. So we're trying to create a New Year's Eve tradition of family trips.
Okay.
And that's the reason.
Great. Was traveling during that time of year more? It's got to be probably one of the busier times of travel, no?
It's more expensive and it's busier, but it's nice because we're all on different schedules. Lynn's teaching schedule is different than my teaching schedule, which is different than the kids' school schedules. And that week between Christmas and New Year's is just a good week for us to be together. It's a good week. But it was. I can't emphasize enough how much the conversations at dinners are what we remember most from these trips.
Great. I love to hear it. And I'm so glad that it went so well and that the four of you have such a good time together as well.
And I miss Jessie not being there. I hope next year.
Sure. Your older daughter next year. Okay. Well, you've written a piece which is titled Reflections from Italy on Law, Faith, and Morality. And it's very good and everybody should read it. And I wonder what inspired this. I almost want to read the whole thing before. Maybe I will and then throw it on before. But what inspired it?
First of all, it's going to be on Dorf on Law. You can find it now on Dorf on Law. So what inspired it was I have been to Europe before, of course, several times, and the huge churches, the huge structures, most of which are religious in nature, not all of them, have always made me feel weird. And it's not because I'm agnostic. It's not because of a particular religious thing. It's because, first of all, the technology that they had to build these hugely ornate, incredible buildings, I don't even understand it. I don't understand how architects and engineers in 20 AD or 50 BC or whatever can plan the math.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing.
It's a great point. You can't help but think about it if you're curious about such things, for sure. Yeah.
It's just, so that's one part of it. But what hit me this trip, and it really hit me hard, we went to, of course, to see David in Florence and the Duomo and then the Vatican and all the churches in Rome that are just so gorgeous and so big. And we got some tours, thousands of people and painting and scaffolding and all this, slaves, the whole shebang. And I started thinking, let's take this from point zero. Let's go to, let's say, 1475. There's untold human suffering throughout the world. And I don't want to make this about Catholics, because obviously religious institutions were built and structures were built all over the world, East and West. This is not a Catholic thing. But I was think of all of these buildings. And now we're about to plan building them in 1437. And it's going to take 26 years, 37,000 slaves, and however many zillions of dollars to build it. And instead of building this building, we put those people to work getting more food to people, training people to provide health care, getting people to build pockets of places in society where people can go who really can't help themselves. And I understand the church plays that role, especially the Catholic Church. I understand how they feed the millions throughout the world. But let's just don't look at it that way. Look at it as we can spend the next 30 years using tens of thousands of basically slaves and other people to build a structure that's physical, or we can feed the world better, clothe the world better, shelter the world better, and provide better medical care. And I was thinking, multiply that now by tens of thousands of structures. And I'm thinking, what are we doing? What are we doing here? I understand. This is not a reflection on religious worship. It's a reflection on the balance between where one worships and feeding the poor, the destitute, the hungry, and the needy. And it was in one last thing. I did it. I haven't tweeted anything since the election really controversial. And I tried it one more time. I will never do it again. I'm on Blue Sky now, and I'll be on Twitter for a few more weeks. But I just tweeted out something very, very, I'm just wondering, I said, on those observations. And the response was so terrible and so awful. But one doesn't have to pray in the world's biggest building. One can pray in a nice building and use the rest to feed the hungry. So that's what I raised. That's the issue I'm thinking about. And it's universal. It's true in America. Go to New York City and go to St. Patrick's, right? Is that what it is, the big one?
Yeah.
That took so much effort and money and people. And New York has so many problems back then.
There are several cathedrals in cities like New York alone. Yeah. In towns across America, they're often the most ornate, elaborate structure. I don't know. Maybe Costco had some kind of church steeple thing at some point that they were fabricating them at rapid pace. But I feel like your piece is, and I'm sure some people have said this, why can't it be both? Why are you making a binary? Why can't they invest in the structure, which is what creates jobs and brings people together? That's the place that community meets. It's worth having a structure such as that. And having it be ornate brings you pride, and having all those kinds of examples. And then the other point is just it's a deeper, I think, question about the necessity and role of religion in any country as it's played out. You mentioned it's not a piece about Catholicism or Christianity because mosques are ornate as well, and a big part of that religion.
And temples.
Yeah, and temples of all types, synagogues and Hindu temples and so on. So it feels like it's maybe your point is too much of like, why can't, the question is, why can't it be both? Why can't?
Well, so Pete, that's a great observation. And it's actually an observation.
And the Catholic Church has billions of dollars and it spends hundreds of millions of dollars fighting poverty and so on. People would make that argument. And
they did. And they did make the argument on Twitter. So here's the thing. Obviously, this is why, frankly, the whole Twitter thing, this piece actually had implications for Twitter as well as religion and church for me. Obviously, it's both things. Like, anyone who thinks that my argument is never build a church, temple, or mosque again doesn't know me, doesn't understand what I'm saying. It's just, but some people react.
Don't build them so ornate. Don't build them, make them so sophisticated. Spend so much money and time.
Here's the analogy. Yeah. I think. I think human beings need incentives to create and do great things. So I'm not in favor of a maximum salary of $100,000 a person for all Americans. That would be stupid. But there is room to say, but that doesn't mean people get to have $100 billion in assets. It can be both. It can be enough incentive to get people to do the best they can do in the world, but not enough to create the monsters that we currently have destroying our planet. Yeah. And so I feel the same way about this. Build a nice, but these churches, so I guess people, the point, in this case, degree is a difference in kind. Degree matters. These buildings are so magnificently ornate and expensive and lavish that we could dial that down in half and still have amazing, incredible, unbelievable buildings. And I don't understand the argument that you must hate religion. Well, whether I hate religion or not isn't the point. That's why I want to go back to point zero. So let's say it's today. It's today right now. And in America, we want to build, well, America's a bad example. In a country that has Canada. Canada wants to build a big religious thing someplace. Canada has a lot of problems. How much the government should spend to build that building, or how much the faith organization should build to build that building, the money's not unlimited. No one is saying it should cost $1 trillion. They're saying it should cost maybe $3 billion. All right, I'm saying build it for $1 billion and use the other $1 billion to feed the poor. I think the balance seems out of whack to me.
I think that the one thing that's funny, and maybe there's some truth to it, if you'll allow for it, I don't know. But the point you're not considering about these ornate structures and religion in general is branding.
Yeah.
And you don't think about that because you're an academic who doesn't think much about branding. You haven't tried to brand your business or yourself, really. You obviously know what it is and you know about it, but isn't that what all of our cults are, whether you're fans of Taylor Swift or you're a conservative Christian. Like, it's branding. This is who I am. This is where I go. This is what we are. We built this. And this is, in the case of religion, this is where we meet in this place of God, which has to be look like a penis.
I want to sing Neil Diamond's Highly Holy now, whatever that song is. Pete, I think, first of all, I do know about branding. You taught me about branding. You're the one who told me I had to go on TikTok, Twitter originally.
Well, yeah.
Sadly, law professors who want to be in the public do have to brand themselves, and God knows I have a brand. I'm the guy who says the court's not a court. And that's a brand, Pete. It is. It is. It's a brand.
Yeah, but you're good at saying that all the time, but you haven't created a graphic and a specific TikTok account and that you open and close with, like Justice Matters, Glenn Kirshner, Justice Matters. That's a brand. I wish a court is not a court. You had made that a brand, but in a way, I don't think you would be who you are if that was something you concerned yourself a lot with. It's just never been your bailiwick.
Fair bailiwick, Pete. So the thing is, these buildings, these incredible buildings, and branding. On Twitter, people responded to me, yeah, destroy all the museums, destroy all the art, Segall. You want to destroy culture. Why do opera? Why do opera? Feed the poor.
Those were just my tweets.
And what I want to say about that is I don't think we need that degree of ornateness to brand ourselves, but there's something more important. Pete, let's just take the Catholic Church.
Oh, let's.
Which I probably know the most about in this context. The power the Catholic Church wields. First of all, the Vatican City is a country. It's the smallest country in the world. It is a country. And the influence and power of this organization has no secular equivalent. There is no secular equivalent to the Catholic Church, to some parts of the Muslim world, et cetera, et cetera. There is no secular equivalent to it. And maybe that's why it happens that way, but there's no analogy. There's no analogy to these buildings given the cost and structure and price and labor. And I just don't understand why people are rebelling so much against the idea. Dial it down a little bit.
Well, maybe it's a competition. Again, I said branding. It's a business. It's for recruiting. Look at the Mormon churches out in Utah and even the Church of Scientology. I mean, these structures, these logos, these buildings are recruitment tools. Ours is the biggest dick.
I'll never forget coming around a corner in Bethesda, Maryland, when I moved there in 1986 to see this magnificent white temple of the God. It just looks huge over. If people know what I'm talking about, in 270 in D.C. around Bethesda. And Pete, when I think, it's funny you say that because I remember my first thought of that is, what the fuck? Feed some poor people. Like, what do you need this for?
Well, that's how you get people into tithe, so you can then take that money and use it to feed poor people. Some people think that should be the role of government.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess my overall idea is, and I want to be very clear about this, everything I've said on social media and in this blog post on Dorf on Law is I'm wondering. Like, I'm not, God knows, your audience knows I can be opinionated, stubborn, and dogmatic. That's not what I'm being here. I'm just thinking, if we were starting today and the choice was building in today's dollars a $190 billion magnificent temple to whatever faith one believes in, or using that money to help your parishioners eat, get medical care, and have food in their homes and clothes on their back, I got to tell you, I'm going for food, clothes, and shelter.
I am too, but you're forcing me again to make the defense that you already made yourself in the argument. They already do that. It's just you're saying, you're acting as if they don't do all of this. I think that's part of the brand, by the way.
But here's the thing. Yes, you're right about that. We shouldn't let that point slide, probably, but I'm going to let it slide. But you are right. That is the response I got. Now, I will say this. So the most controversial constitutional law professor of the last few years, and it's not close, is this guy named Adrian Vermeule at Harvard Law School, who was once he still is brilliant. He hates originalism, and his arguments are better than mine because he's smarter than I am. He hates deregulation.
Sundays with Adrian Vermeule.
He thinks the the arguments against the administrative state are stupid. He's right about that, and he's smarter than I am about that. But he's also very, very, very into common good constitutionalism and government as coercion on moral issues and things like that. But even he responded to me politely in this exchange and said, the Catholic Church does feed the millions. And in my post, I say, yeah, of course they do. And they always have. And that's a great thing. But so now we just stop and don't ask the next question. Could you do it better? Could you do it more? And why are you not doing it more given your endless resources? So I don't know. I think it's a fair question to ask in general. How much should we put into structure and how much we put into food, clothing, and shelter?
I think that's always an important question, which is why all of those institutions should be audited, and the question around any tax credits that they get should be questioned as well, obviously.
Yeah.
But the second part of your blog piece at Dorf on Law is, as it always has been, one of the best parts of you, arguments that you make, which is one about gender equity, because you write in this piece, you say, when we toured the Vatican, I was struck by the age, grandeur, art, and just plain force, power, and authority that is wielded by the smallest country in the world. Now imagine the Pope and other similarly situated religious leaders of faith that treat women differently than men, like Orthodox Jews, Southern Baptists, and many strands of Islam. Imagine him issuing a big announcement that, of course, women can be priests, cardinals, popes, rabbis, ministers, imams, etc., because despite real physical and biological differences, women can do any job men can do and should have the same opportunities. The announcements would change the world for the better so fast. Why not then?
Yeah.
Power. Power. Power.
Well, then say that, because that's not what they say. The answer, so will you read the next paragraph, the next few couple of lines, the pedestal lines?
Yeah.
That's important. Yeah.
You say, and no women on pedestal arguments will be considered. They are misogynistic. What do you mean by that?
So whenever I have these discussions with thoughtful people of faith, they respond to me, you're treating this, let's just take the Catholic Church specifically. Mm-hmm. I've had discussions with people like Father Daly, who people know on Twitter, and other people, who's a law professor at Notre Dame. The answer is often, they're not inferior. We're not treating them differently. Women have different roles because of biological differences. And this is simply a way of recognizing those differences. It doesn't demean their value or anything like that. To which I always respond, they get to make none of the decisions. All of the decision makers are men. They've always been men. I don't understand that argument. And then some people say, making decisions for the group like that and that kind of dynamic, we're trying to save women from that arduous something or other, and it's all stupid. Like we can't. You
know what you just made me think, and it's the most unoriginal of thoughts on this discussion of gender equity and your statement about men can do the same jobs, women can do the same jobs any men can, except for certain physical labor like nose tackle.
It's
interesting to see that we have not ever seen a woman compete in a Division I athlete other than like kicker. Like, when will a woman be a successful running back?
There have been Division I female college wrestlers, I believe.
Okay, fine. Wrestlers, fine. But there's something about football in particular. Well, all male sports, women can't compete in male sports, but they compete against each other. And now they're making money, finally. So we're getting there. But I was joking about the only job. I was just having this conversation because somebody said, I think me, to my daughters, women can do any job that men can do, any job. And then I tried to think, and I was like, maybe not professional football. Like, maybe you can't play for the Jets yet. I don't know.
No, but Pete, seriously.
I have a better point, which was almost, I'm sorry that I went down that road at all. But you said simply, women can make decisions as well as men. And isn't that any job that men traditionally hold and will not let go of, and all the arguments around gender? Because the point is, you could actually make an argument that women are better decision makers. And I wouldn't necessarily make the argument, but you could generalize and say they're less, at least seemingly, conflicted around a number of different things. And you don't see the kinds of controversies and scandals and so on with women and women-run organizations. It's just not to say that they don't have them. So just when it comes to decision making, I just thought, if that's the main requirement of any role in power. Certainly we're talking about religious institutions, much less C-suite executives or managers of an Arby's. Like, of course women can do it if that's what it's about. And it is. It's what it is. It's decision making.
Right, Pete. Right. So exactly. And just give me a minute here because we talked about this.
Let's talk more about women without them here and their ability to make decisions.
You inspired me years ago because I was worried about it to write a piece in the Daily Beast about this, which I did, which was very, very specific about how awful I think this situation is. And I want to go back to that because whether we're talking about a podcast meant to entertain, whether we're talking about running a football team, whether we're talking about running Exxon, Harvard, or the United States of America, or anything, it seems so totally clear to me that if you say women are not eligible for that position, then you are saying something of grave importance.
Yes.
And terribleness.
Yes.
And we let Orthodox temples and Orthodox Jews and Islam and the Catholic Church, we let them skate. And we shouldn't. So the way I want to put that is, if you're starting an organization that has to do difficult things, and you immediately say women are not eligible for this role, what could possibly be your reason? Now, if your organization's mission is to lift incredibly heavy objects, then you might say there are women who are there are an unlimited number of women who are really, really strong and as strong as most men. But there are no women probably as strong as the strongest men, so I'm just going to go with the strongest men because it's easier to go through the job applications or whatever. But in anything that's obviously a stupid example. My point is, for anything else, and I think it's even stupid for that, for anything else, when the Catholic Church says you can't be a priest, it is saying something of unbelievable importance and terribleness. And they want to minimize what they're saying there. So my next question is, why are you doing this? I don't want 5-year-olds to be priests, and I can give you reasons for that. I don't want 9-year-olds driving cars. I can give you reasons for that. I don't think I want small, frail women guards in very violent men's prisons. I can give you reasons for that. But what's the reason for not letting women be priests and rabbis? And I can't think of one.
Well, because they won't let the men fuck the kids, I think would be one of the things that's probably ever present in the Catholic Church. It's certainly at play. And don't tell me it's not. Predators don't tell on other predators, which allows them to prey more. But it's obviously about power and control. And patriarchy is just one kind of power and control. All of us in every partnership, not all of us, but we all struggle for control in different relationships. So everybody understands what that is. But the quest for challenged power and control is as old as we are, isn't it?
I also learned, yes, and but again, I want to be very specific. Women, you're not allowed to apply. Why? And there's no good answer to that why that I've ever heard.
Well, it's you taught me this years ago, and you probably said this. I've repeated it a million times to both the girls and every other father I know, and much less mother. When I talk about the Catholic Church, I say I'm not opposed to bring my daughter into the Catholic Church for any kind of funeral or marriage or wedding or anything like that. I'm not that hardcore. And by the way, when I was very anti-Catholic and anti-religious, even when Ava was born, and Val, of course, we had to bring her to Sicily to be baptized. Their family there is very religious. We had a fake being married at the time because we weren't even married, so I had to wear a fake wedding band. And she said, we're going to get her baptized, and we have to there. It doesn't mean anything, so don't give me any grief about it. I go, no, I'm not going to do it. She's like, she's an infant. She doesn't know. I go, I'm a principled person. I'm not getting my daughter baptized. It's not important to me, and it needs to be said to your family and my family that this is not important to me. And she goes, we'll probably get about €4,000. And I go, I sold out real quick. I was like, is it going to be catered? I can't wait till our daughter's baptism. The point, however, that's the joke. The point is, I wouldn't bring my daughters, when I bring my daughters into the Catholic Church or when I talk to them about it, I make the point you just made. There's very few organizations or institutions or marketplaces like retail. There's nothing really, maybe a golf course or something, a men's gym, a Y. There's very few places that won't let women come in and be paying members. But this is the only place where you can't be a leader. You can't be a leader because of your lady parts. And I never had to say it twice to my girls. They're like, I don't get that because the argument you're making, there is no argument.
And Pete, we can actually connect this to law a little bit for a second, just so I can earn my paycheck. So in America, under the Equal Protection Clause, when the government treats similarly situated people differently, we have to explain why, if they're in fact similarly situated. And so a 13-year-old is not allowed to drive a car in any state in the country, I think, but 16-year-olds can. The 13-year-old says that's not fair. It's a government decision discriminating against me. And the answer is right. We are discriminating against you. And here are the reasons we don't think you should drive a car at 13. And then we can debate what the appropriate age is. Or if we're talking about the age to vote, or we're talking about welfare levels of Medicaid and what the number.
What about allowing women to drive cars? I'm against that. Right. I should have mentioned that at the top.
Okay. Here's my point. Under American law today, but this could change in the next few years with the stupid Supreme Court, but under American law today, when the government makes decisions based on gender, it has to have a really important reason to do so. And the means or the technique it is using to achieve whatever goal they're achieving has to be no greater than necessary to achieve that goal, because we don't like the government to make decisions based on gender or race. Right. We don't like that. It's a negative thing in America, and it should be, obviously. Your gender and your race and your religion should play no role in government benefits, burdens, and penalties. Now, Exxon, under our law, is not allowed to discriminate against women, and under law, not the Constitution, and the statutory law, and they probably wouldn't in 2025 discriminate against women if it hurt their bottom line. Anyway, here's my thing about religion again. If you're telling me you're excluding women from these positions in toto, I still need the why, but the why has to be unbelievably compelling, because we should all agree doling out benefits and penalties and hierarchies based on gender is a bad thing. So why do you do it? And there's no good answer in 2025.
Have you debated anyone on a recorded state? Like, maybe I should bring someone on to debate you. Who would do it?
There's a law. I have several names I can throw at you off air to do this. Yes,
but they'll make legal arguments, though.
No, they won't.
Right.
I don't want to debate the legal arguments. I want to debate. I'm not even. Hold on, I got to make this point. Yeah. My piece, I get misinterpreted all the time on this, then I get in big trouble. And if I get in trouble on this, you get in trouble on this. I want to be clear.
Publicity.
In America, I'm not saying the law should require the Catholic Church to make women priests. In other words, I do think the law should make Exxon make women eligible to be CEOs of Exxon. And by the way, if a woman was good enough to play in the NFL, I think she has a legal right to do so.
No doubt about it.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
but I'm not saying
no NFL owner is stopping that, by the way.
Right. No. A woman good enough to play in the NFL would be hired in a second.
Yeah, sure.
But so I want to be. I don't want the pushback on this. So this is not a legal. The court should make you do it thing, or the government should make. In fact, the government under our system can't make the Catholic Church hire women, female priests. So this is not so. But we can still borrow from that body of knowledge, and the Catholic Church and Jewish temples in America and mosques in America, and God knows Southern Baptists and Mormons, all of these huge institutions, huge, with incredible money, means, property, and everything else. Some of them exclude women from this role. The reason doesn't have to be, that makes sense, or that's a good reason. The reason needs to be unbelievably compelling to justify it. I can't think of even a rational reason to say women can't be priests. If anything, right. Pete, who has more empathy, generally speaking, for the poor and the downtrodden and the sick, women or men? If anything, I would generalize and say I'd prefer to have women priests than male priests. But that's a different conversation.
Well,
one more thing, Pete. Yeah. I heard from several different people something I had never heard before on this trip. I want to be clear that I did not hear this from anybody in law or anything like that. But in talking to other people, and I don't know if you ever heard this, so I'm curious, or your audience, I'm curious. I was told by, I think, reliable sources that everybody in Italy knows that many of this is really blasphemous, so forgive me, but this is what I was told. Many of the cardinals, many of the priests who live in and around Vatican City have families right there. Children, wives, hidden wives and families literally on property, like just off the property. And everybody knows this. It's like one of those secrets that I keep using this example and I hate to use it, but back in 1964, Rock Hudson was the Tom Cruise of the day, but everybody knew Rock Hudson was gay, even though we didn't know he was gay, but we did. This is the same thing. Like these Cardinals, Pete, they have families and kids and wives. Have you ever heard that before? Because that shocked me.
No, but I'm looking it up, and there's got to be some kind of investigative journalism on it, or
I have not done that work yet. But I was surprised.
You just decided to perpetuate it on my podcast?
Yes.
Just to defame several Cardinals?
I didn't name anybody. It makes sense to me, Pete. It rings true without knowing it's true or not. It rings true to me. These sources were like, of course they do. This is so obvious. Everybody knows it. And it's not just true at the Vatican. It's true
what kind of people told you that?
I can't go into that.
Well, come on.
I can't.
Who are your sources in Italy, in Rome? Who are you talking to in Rome? Is he talking to one person that is a scholar, probably, that you want to name?
No,
some gelato boy.
I want to be clear. It was not the person I'm talking about in that book.
And some gelato boy named Giuseppe. He's like, hey, everybody knows.
Pete, I do want to get serious now. I
thought that was pretty serious. You're fucking libelous.
The duty of celibacy, the alleged duty of celibacy, has to be one of the most pernicious, has caused more. Think of the pain and suffering that duty has caused to actual kids around the world.
Think of, I got a lot of jokes about what it does to the person that is committed to it or says they are. But what are you saying, that celibacy creates deviancy?
Of course. No, it's the illusion of celibacy allows some degree of deviation.
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that. I haven't said anything. I haven't talked about this, but ran into a guy when I was home at our local ski resort, and he worked there. And I had bumped into a friend, and we were talking. My dad was there, and this friend of mine, woman, was there, my age, but attractive woman by anybody's standard. And I bumped into her. She's an old high school friend. And so we're talking, we're catching up. She's there with her daughter. And she says to this guy, thank you so much for putting my daughter in the ski lesson. And she goes, I'll find a way to make it up to you. And this man, who's about 75, says, oh, wow. Well, I can't do anything like that. I'm a married man. And then she is now in the awkward position that many women have to be like, oh, I wasn't suggesting anything like that, sir. And so I immediately pipe up and I say, wow, that was a pretty presumptuous statement. And he immediately gets defensive and he goes, oh, no. It's like, I'm a minister. And I said, of course you are. Because anybody who immediately says I'm a man of the cloth, like really quickly upon meeting them, is trying to establish a kind of credibility that maybe they don't deserve. And as my friend Dan Savage constantly tweets every time we hear it, which is almost every day, if as many clowns were convicted of sexual assault against kids, they'd shut down circuses everywhere. If as many clowns as ministers and priests.
He's done great work on
but
that.
It is such. If you say so often, if you put out your virtues like publicly ahead of time like that, especially like, oh, I'm a minister, I couldn't possibly do anything. Then later, I'm talking to my dad who knows a little bit about this guy. He's like, oh yeah, that guy's a notorious creep. I'm like, yeah, shocking that a minister who would say that up front. Like I just wanted to say to him, you know what? If you're a minister, a man of the cloth, or a good person, let me find out.
Absolutely. And also, I was thinking also about this issue from this perspective. It's kind of like celibacy for you, but not for me. It's the leaders and the cardinals and the Jewish fundamentalist rabbis at the top and all that stuff. Generally speaking, Pete, it's my life experience that those at the top do not deny themselves many things, but they love denying those things to others.
Yeah.
And
well,
let's just take a hypothetical.
In the Catholic Church, many of those at the top are actually bottoms.
Imagine someone who's a person of faith, deep Catholic faith, or any of the fundamentalist faith, and believes very strongly in all the things you and I believe in goodness and kindness and being present for people and all that. And they would love to be a priest and mend and help people, but they don't want to be celibate. If that happens to you in Rome and you want to be a cardinal, well, maybe you can have both.
Yeah, no,
but
it absolutely weeds out a lot of otherwise qualified, interested, passionate, good people who would want to be a leader. And that's why they're called Methodists. But by the way,
the Roman Colosseum. Can we talk about the Roman Colosseum?
And let me just tell you this funny story. My dad chose to go to Christian Brothers Academy, a Catholic school in Syracuse. In high school, he chose to go there. His dad, who's Catholic, wasn't him. And so his dad said, "Hey, son, are you thinking about becoming a priest maybe?" And my Catholic dad says to his Catholic father, my grandfather, my dad goes, No, why, Dad? And he goes, No, I'm just, because that's a screwy deal. Which I think is just a funny way for a man of that age, of that era to say a lot without saying anything.
Yes. Plus, it's a nice turn of phrase.
Yes. So let's get to the Colosseum.
So for people who have not been there, I just want to describe it a little bit, at least the way we did it. I know there are many different ways to do it. We traveled by subway, and then you come up from the metro station.
Yeah.
And when you're in the metro station, you could be in Chicago.
Clean?
Metro's great. Yeah, Metro's great. And by the way, as far as I can tell, no one's being pushed off the tracks. No one's being lit on fire. Different conversation. And you come out of it, and it's just there. This colossus structure, this amazing thing that somehow was built a zillion years ago and holds 70,000 people.
Wow.
That's like the Jet Stadium. That's like Giant Stadium. That's insane to be built that way. And so that was, and then we had a great tour of that, explaining the historical stuff. But one of the things that just really hit me so hard was, I don't know enough about ancient history to know how Rome at that moment in time when the Colosseum was being built, which took, of course, decades, I think, how it compared to the cultures of the Far East and in Africa. I don't know the answers to those questions. But my intuition is Rome was the most advanced technologically, one of the more advanced civilizations technologically, and frankly, in terms of government and everything else. This was by the standards of the day, a very civilized, advanced society, and yet they had games where people killed each other for sport.
Yeah, they're coming back. I think they're bringing those back.
Well, I'm going to get to that in a second. And I was thinking about it. So I asked the guide, and I made a great guide there, and I said to him, "Do you find it interesting?" Because he had already shown himself open to this kind of conversation. Do you find it interesting that the most educated and the most elite of the societies at that time literally played sports where people killed each other to the death for the reason of keeping the people happier so they wouldn't revolt? Give them violence, give them gore, give them sex, because these gladiators were tall, good-looking, the biggest of them. Give them gore, violence, and sex, and give them bread. That's why it's called bread and circus. And give them bread, and then they won't revolt. And I found that, like, how, as a species, so we kill each other for sport to maintain our government is such a bizarre thought to me. But then I realized we know with certainty in 2025 what football does to the skulls of football players.
That's where you're going.
And the thirst for violence, the thirst to see that. You and I talked about professional wrestling before. At least that's fake violence, which is good. But Pete, the idea that we keep people in line by making slaves kill each other or gladiators kill each other in front of everybody is not that removed.
Was that the stated goal? It's a very easy kind of thing for people to say is give them food, give them the bread and circuses, and they won't see what we're doing. There's all, I'm sure, intellectual ways to say that, historical ways to say that. But people say it now as well. We're all just paying attention, whatever is making us fat and happy. Meanwhile, the government or the private sector or the whoever is, taking your lunch and your life and stealing your dreams and so on. It's always been a thing where as long as we're entertained to a certain point, we have a certain level of existence, and certainly a lot of people punch right out of it or are just miserable in it, can't get out of it. But isn't that part of almost every economy, whether it wants to be or not?
I don't know. That's a great question, Pete. I don't have the expertise to answer it, and I won't answer it.
Not saying it's excusable. It just seems like a very easy thing to be like, oh, they did this to distract us from. They had us gladiators in the ring, which is entertaining. It makes money. Again, the Coliseum is a make work job.
The point for me that's intellectually and emotionally interesting is I have a hard time today, even though I know I'm wrong. Like I know something is true, and I still have a hard time with it. There is no connection between morality and intelligence or ethics and education. There just isn't. And this is one of those things that brings that home to me. There were much less civilized nations in the world during that time who didn't kill each other for sport.
Right.
I would like to think that people who can reason could think of a way to do a bread and circus type of environment, which I'm in favor of, feed the people for sure, give them entertainment for sure, that doesn't involve horrific, gory torture.
I'm interested. While I'm interested in your point about the connection between morality and education and resources that you may or may not have, you're saying you could be the most educated, most intelligent person in the world and the most evil, insidious person, and we've seen that over and over. Obviously, and that at your job. Like, this guy is really smart and a huge dick to everybody and doesn't care about anyone. So I realize that there's not necessarily a connection there. But I guess what you made me think is, like, we have come a long way from fighting to the death for entertainment or fighting beasts. Now we have MMA, so maybe that's a bit of a regression from boxing, but you still have standards even there. And that is pure.
Hold on.
Yeah.
What if you knew that, I'm not saying this is the number, but what if you knew that the median NFL player who plays 5 to 10 years loses 20 years off their life? Those aren't the facts, but let's assume they were.
Yeah.
All right. Nothing would change.
Well, that has to change from the player's standpoint. No one's making them play that game.
And that's the difference, of course, because the gladiators were slaves.
And it may very well be worth it given the actuarial statistics, especially of your position. Like kicker, I'm taking that. Even offensive tackle, like those guys don't have the kind of concussions and injuries and so on that are necessarily. I'm making up positions, but I could probably point to other sports and so on, which aren't.
But Pete, you're. So in the Roman times, and again, these were people forced to do this. But so they literally fight to the death. Two people would get into the arena and they would fight to the death.
Yeah.
Okay. And then that inspires people not to revolt against the government and to have a good time and whatever. Here's the point I want to make. I don't know if the difference between that and us going to a football game knowing 20 years from now this person's health is going to be severely deteriorated. Wait. No, let me finish.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not interested in the motivation of the football player or the gladiator.
No, you're interested in the audience.
Yes. Yeah. That's what's fascinating.
Well, I hear you, and I guess I felt a certain amount of guilt around the discovery of when the obvious that the NFL and a lot of others hide the concussion, CTE and all of that. But I still would say, I guess I'll play a sexist trope or something, but it's somewhat true that the same women who are like, oh, I can't watch men, play football and crash into each other. Now I'm off to watch my Desperate Housewives show. Like, we are entertained by several different things. Morally, is housewives, those catty women that create a kind of permission structure for behavior and consumerism. And like, I could point to anybody's entertainment and be like, is that very moral? Like, what you're watching is horseshit. So I guess I'm assuaging my own guilt, like, how are we entertaining ourselves? And what is the most pure form of entertainment? And by the way, I admire the person who doesn't need any of that, who's just like, I'm nature guy. I'm basically with horses all day, and that's all I need. And then I go home and read by candlelight.
The argument that reminds me of is when I have a close friend in Atlanta who was a lawyer, and we clerked for different judges at the same time. And this is 1983. And we were debating which is worse for women and women's rights, Playboy or Love Boat, the show Love Boat.
Right.
And her position was very strongly Playboy. My position was with deference to her being a woman and having a sense of things I can't have, to me, the dumb, ditzy, blonde role models on Love Boat were much worse for women than the fairly empowered, not completely naked women in Playboy magazine. Now, that's controversial. I'm not taking a strong position on that. But the thing is, my 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds in 1970s watching Love Boat, they would not see what's coming at them. If they're looking at Playboy, they know what's coming at them.
Very, very good point. And you could go from Love Boat to lots of other television programs and other sources of media today that are creating, I won't think of one that affects women as much as thinking of a lot of these shows that affect young men and the way that they're thinking, like, what's worse? And pornography is often not going to be anywhere near the top in terms of what causes more long-term damage. And by the way, you also made me think, like, well, there were only certain acting roles available for women, and still I'm not blaming
the women.
No. I know you're not. But it's like thinking about women doing pornography or women playing this role. I bet you the woman would rather have an executive job or be the captain of the ship on that TV show, but that wasn't offered to them. And now I think about how the tables have flipped just a little bit in terms of social media really does. And I'll make this argument. I'm happy for anybody to disarm me, because then I'll learn and I'll become powerful. Benefit women in many ways, beautiful women and good looking women on a lot of them. You can get millions of followers, and then you could go, by the way, because you're attractive, then you could go sell something that could affect people's lives in a good way. Usually they sell bullshit and clothes and so on, but specifically OnlyFans. I've made this case a few times without very little research. That is a place for women. It is a safe place for women to make a lot of money. I'm pretty convinced of it. I interviewed an OnlyFans actor who is making more a month than she was as a lawyer, and she'd gone to law school and she's working at a firm, and now she's making all this money on OnlyFans. I'm not suggesting anybody do it. I am suggesting in an economy that is changing rapidly, and while there's more opportunity for women than ever before, hey, take your shots where they are, rather than change the world on your own. Sometimes you just have to take this job or that job, and it seems like that's what we're talking about to a certain extent.
Can I make one last? Yeah, I agree with that, Pete. Well said. Can I make one last point about religion and reflection I had in Rome?
Imagine if the only jobs that were open to men were like these limited, gendered jobs.
Men can't be high school principals. Sorry, you can be deputy principal, but not principal.
I'm just thinking of even more like blue collar, like men obviously do a lot of things with their hands still, but like if you were exclusively cleaning, you know, see men cleaning or something like that. Like that was all that was available to you to be able to support your life. You had to do this awful job that you didn't like. Some people love it. Anyway, go ahead.
So one other thing I thought a lot about in Rome while I was reflecting in these great churches was the whole controversy about wedding designers and bakers and people who don't want to provide secular services to same-sex weddings or don't want to serve gays and lesbians for whatever reason or whatever. And I was thinking about it, and I've written a lot about this, and I was a little taken aback. I hadn't thought more about this specific point I'm about to make, which I do make in this piece, which is, okay, so you're a person of faith, and you believe God condemns same-sex marriages. Okay, that's your judgment. That's your opinions, and I disagree, but that's fine. That's what you believe. And you run a store and that provides wedding services of some kind, and you don't want to support this thing that you think your deity disapproves of, and you decide I'm not going to sell them my services. This is insulting to them. This will make them feel bad, but I have to be consistent with my faith. And I've gotten in trouble over the last 5 years by saying things like, no, the decision to exclude someone from your store is a decision based on hate, and I don't care if it's based on faith or anything else. But the point I want to make here is there is no human being on the planet today who is 100% consistent with their traditional religious beliefs. There isn't. You can't be. It doesn't. No one's stoning their daughters for adultery, and no one. There's a million different rules we can talk about, and that's not a criticism. That's just an observation. And there are two reasons for it. One is we're flawed human beings, and even if we had the best motives, we're going to compromise at times because we're flawed. But also, it's long and complicated to do everything. The Bible, the Torah, everything. All of the rules are complicated and difficult. So we make exceptions. And by we, every single person of faith in the world makes exceptions.
A simpler, more pithy would say we pick and choose the parts we.
Yes. Why would you pick to make someone else feel bad? Like, why would you pick? So I've had this argument a lot in the
back to the argument about the cake making a cake. Why would you pick? Well, maybe you're not picking that. You're just, it's against your principle to support.
There are many other things that you do, though.
Right.
And so why this one? In other words, and then I'll make the legal connection, Pete. For the law to give you the right to say, I'm not going to comply with the law because of a religious objection, it better be freaking strong, and you better be freaking consistent, and they're not. None of them are. So I just want to say again, as I've said on this show so many times, I'm taking no legal position on a wedding cake designer who says, I do art for a living, and this is expression for me, and the government can't force me to express myself in a way I don't want to. I think that's probably correct under First Amendment law. But my next point is, but why are you doing this? And he's going to say, because of my faith. And then I'm going to say, okay, here are 50 other things your faith requires you to do. You don't do any of them. Why this one? Drill down on this one. And then it brings me back full circle to Andrew Young and the Ku Klux Klan. Andrew Young told me in 1983 that the first thing to understand about the Ku Klux Klan is they're afraid, is that it's fear. Yes. They're afraid of losing who they are, where they come from, their culture. It's called the War of Northern Aggression for a reason, because they think they are scared of that. And I get that. I do get that. And I think this wedding baker is scared in some way that this will spread and he'll become a minority and his faith will be with all that stuff. And what I want to say about all of that really hard is that's very human. I empathize. I understand. But what are you exactly afraid of? Like, I want to know what they're afraid of. But the practical point, Pete, and the way I end the piece is we've got to figure out what is making white rural Americans so afraid.
Well, other white rural Americans telling them to be afraid all the time. Because do you know what just happened to me? I just went into town and I saw a black guy, or every right-wing talk radio host I've ever heard. Like, black folks are constantly being blamed for everything. And you can tell better than I ever can about the court cases where black men were accused completely falsely of doing something, and so on. And so it's a motivating, money-making, histories, generations. It's a very American thing, specifically about black folks, obviously, to be scared. Don't allow them in. And the truth is, that's the truth of, by the way, every other ethnicity as well. I was talking to somebody the other day who said that African black people are racist against American black people. Talked to Jewish people about how they feel, like Hispanic. Everybody has any number of groups and feelings based on history and whatever else they've had poured all over them their entire lives to feel scared of another group of people. I'm scared of Malaysians.
Which brings me...
Because I've never met one. And so I'd be nervous. What am I going to do or say?
Which brings me to Megyn Kelly. So I rewatched, and I recommend this to your audience, I rewatched Jon Stewart's skewering of Megyn Kelly's bizarre behavior the night she said, of course, Santa Claus is white. The next thing you're going to tell me is Jesus wasn't white. And the way Jon Stewart skewers that whole show.
Oh, that must be old, that clip.
No, it's very old. But
yeah, that's fine.
For the point. The point I want to make about it is, I went back and watched it carefully because, Pete, I don't think Megyn Kelly is dumb. In other words, this is not, I believe there are many people on Fox News who are dumb. Megyn Kelly's not one of them. I think she's educated. I think she's smart.
She knows better.
And the fear and bias. If you watch her face, when she says Santa Claus is obviously white,
I think she did believe that. Like, I think she did feel when she said that. I think she was pretty shocked, probably at the backlash, because she was like, "Doesn't everybody think that?"
Right?
Because she doesn't know any black people,
and she's not even aware of her own bias.
Right? Yeah, you're right.
And
like most of us.
It's such a clear-cut example of something that. So what I want to say about that on the sphere issue is let's take it out of religion. Let's go back to the Ku Klux Klan in 1983 and Andrew Young. That same year, my ex-wife drove from Atlanta to Alabama and drove through a Klan rally, and Pete, it really affected her. Like she was not herself for a week because she had never seen anything like it. Hundreds of people in white robes displaying hatred right there in the public square.
Yeah.
And it really upset her. And so we talked a lot about it. And then by coincidence, the thing with Andrew Young happened. It's okay to be afraid. Like, it's even okay to say you're afraid. I don't have any problem
with people who are different than you?
No, it's okay for white Christians to say, for me, it's okay for people to be afraid of losing whatever it is they think they're losing.
Well, that's a different way. Yeah, yes, right. Yeah, I think that's.
But what I try to tell my teenagers is the thoughts and emotions and feelings are fair, but don't act on them in ways that hurt other people.
Right.
And that's my thing about religion. It's the power. Then to bring it full circle, the Vatican has so much money and so much power and so much land and so much control. It's not like a museum. It's not like the Louvre. People kept comparing it. Segall wants to take all the art out of the Louvre. No, I don't. The Louvre doesn't make government policy.
Right.
But the Vatican does.
Yeah, all over the world.
Right. And can't we say it's okay to be afraid, but it's not okay to oppress?
I like that a lot, which brings me to my final question that you made me think of just a bit ago. And you've always had a great influence on me and certainly our audience talking about these difficult issues that we've all thought a lot about, but maybe not enough about or examined even our own thoughts about. But one of the issues that I just always struggle with is the pernicious idea that people from all nations and generations have held that to be religious is to be somehow morally superior. And yet, you are one of the most moral people I know. I live by a certain set of principles that I update, that I break. I'm far from perfect, that's for sure. But I have these ideas, and I try really hard not to do even some simple things like get ahead of somebody in line physically, much less cut them off in traffic, or to obviously loftier ideals of how I treat people and myself. But you have been this way for a long time, very principled. I remember when I was visiting you once, you were complaining about one of your neighbors, and I said, let's go vandalize their home. And you're like, that might be good for your career, but I don't think it's good for me. And I go, all right, let's just steal their car. And you're like, I think you should leave. And I did.
That, by the way, that really happened, people. Go ahead.
So, and then I burnt down your guest house, and I will again. What is your wrap on the comparison between moral values between those who are religious and who are taught a certain set of moral values and those who might not be taught those because they aren't religious, or maybe they were? I remember reading the UN Declaration of Human Rights for the first time and going, yeah, that sounds good. That sounds as good as any religious thing I've heard. And it includes something against rape.
Right. That's a unbelievably large question. And my friend, I am going to ask your permission to answer it the next time we speak.
Okay.
It really, that the connection or lack thereof, or whatever one thinks about between faith and integrity. Let's call it integrity.
Okay.
Faith and integrity and faith and morality. Not only have I spent a lot of time thinking about it, I actually asked a priest to come on my podcast, which he did, to discuss that very issue.
Oh, I'll go listen to that one.
Very early.
Which episode?
The priest is a friend of mine. It wasn't his fault. I was not good that day. I had a bad day myself. I was worried about I was
disrespectful.
But it is something that I've given a lot of thought about.
What's the name of that priest? I want to just look up that episode.
He's actually done it twice. Father Bill Daly is his name.
Got it.
But the first one is when we did some discussion of this. I didn't push back in that conversation, and I wish I had. And I was early on in my podcast career at that point, and I wasn't sure what to do. But this topic truly interests me, both because of its connection to religion, faith, and morality, but also transparency. And that brings us to law, Supreme Court, and others. It's all connected to me.
Well,
so if we could defer that, I would really.
Yeah, we can. But let's just add, and I'm sure you'll agree, where it comes up for me, or has come up for me the most, has been parenting.
Yes, 100%.
Because a lot of times other parents are like, well, I wasn't sure exactly what to do, so we brought them, we sent them to church school, or, you know, we told them that this or that about God or whatever. And I always want to be like, well, here, have you tried this?
Right.
Well, I don't know what to tell them about death. Well, my mom gave me a book called Freddie the Leaf, and that did it. Leaf just fell and died. And I was like, okay, got it. Like it. So yeah, I just think it comes up a lot in parenting.
I do hope, and maybe this will be the trigger for the next show. I hope it's universally acknowledged that there, just empirically, there are terrible people of faith, and there are great people of faith, and there are terrible people of no faith and great people of no faith. And if you're going to start making correlations, you better be damn careful.
And to be a great person isn't to talk a good game, it's to live a good game. And so too often people are measured by their words and not their actions. So I've always thought that about people. That's how I measure someone. Well, how does he treat? How does she treat people? Not what does she say about treating people? And that's, as a parent, again, I've thought a lot about both my successes and my shortcomings and, quote, failures as a role model and how I've behaved, not how I've told my daughters to behave.
Well, so there's no question in my mind after raising 3 daughters, the youngest of which now is 15 and a half. There's no question in my mind that this I will be dogmatic about. What you do is infinitely, in terms of role modeling for your children, what you do is infinitely more important than what you say, and it's not close.
And that was never more present. I'll admit mine, and if you have one, you can. Otherwise, we'll wrap. Never more ever present than the moment I said to my daughter, and she's about 13, don't smoke pot. We don't know what it does to your developing brain. And then she pointed to a plant in the garden. She goes, what is that? I go, that is pot.
Right.
What's it for? I go, I'm going to eat it. I won't smoke it though. And then,
So, yeah. So,
like action. You can't tell your kids not to drink and then go drinking. You can do it. Maybe that's not a great example, but in terms of how you treat,
but here's an example.
How you treat people.
Family outing, and there's 15, and that's not my family, just a typical family, 14-year-old, 18-year-old, and the family has a couple glasses of wine with dinner. I don't think there's a problem role modeling drinking wine with dinner. But if you start getting tipsy and obnoxious and mean after you do it, then you're role modeling a behavior that shouldn't be role modeled to your children.
Right.
And I think we should all be aware that saying to them afterwards, don't just do what I did, is the dumbest approach to parenting, I think. Now, it's okay to admit mistakes, which I do all the time. But I'm just saying, when it comes to faith, morality, what you do is so much more important than what you say. So when we have that conversation, I'm only interested in what people have done, not what they've said.
Which is why a success would be like, I didn't get the electric car before everybody and the solar panels before everybody because I thought I was making any difference at all in the environment. I got it, yes, to save money at the time, but more to role model for my listening audience that it could be done if you had a certain amount of money.
I remember.
And more importantly, for my daughters who saw the solar panels every day, saw me plug the car in every day, and that's what they saw, and I normalized it then. I thought that was...
I'm sorry.
But they also saw me eat meat. So
I'm sorry to interrupt that. But that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If it's true, I am not saying it's true. I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it's true. But if it's true that it is a well-known secret in Italy that many of the cardinals and other people around the Vatican have secret families, if that's true, then it's the exact opposite of what we're talking about. They're role modeling a lifestyle that you and I both know, celibacy, is not a realistic lifestyle.
Right. Wow.
While actually acting in a way completely, I can think of nothing more pernicious than that if it is true. And I'm not saying it is true.
And if you had nothing to hide, why are you wearing that big, bulky dress? Thank you, sir.
I will say this to your audience.
Yes.
Get yourselves to Italy. What an amazing country. Yeah. I've been there a couple of times, but we had, and my teenagers loved it. Just the cobblestone streets and the people.
Did you see that their fascist-adjacent female holding up the patriarchy, Prime Minister Meloni, was just at Mar-a-Lago kissing the ring? Or I don't know why she was kissing the ring, but she did her due diligence, I'm sure.
The government there, I think,
Trump tried to fuck her, which I thought was really not shocking. I'm sorry, I'm a little raw. I just watched The Apprentice.
The government there appears to be not so good. But the people, the people in Rome and Florence, I was thinking about this because I grew up in New York. We had like 15 experiences with people that would never happen in New York ever.
Well, a lot of that is that I think it's true of any, I don't mean to put them down or any other country where their main source of income is tourism. Like, you be nice to people and it keeps them coming back. And New Yorkers it's not about the tourism. It's about,
but isn't New York's biggest source of revenue, in fact, tourism?
It may be its biggest source, but it's one of hundreds as opposed to Italy, some Caribbean island.
I'm going to make a big statement and then hang up.
Okay.
I actually think part of it is, and this is just me totally guessing, bullshitting, speculating. I think on average, despite our we have more material benefits than they do. I think they're just happier. I think people in other countries are happier. I
think that's generally true, just for the simple fact that they know that if they do lose their job, they won't lose their health insurance.
I just feel like they go through life a little lighter.
Well, wouldn't you if you knew you had health insurance?
Yes.
I'll keep coming back to it because it's the main distinction. And I have plenty of good things to say about Italians, by the way. I'm sorry if I've offended anybody. I've spent plenty of time there. I'm a quarter. I've got the credibility. And so I'll leave it there.
Thank you, my friend. My battery's about to die.
Okay. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much. My battery is about to die to get out of a conversation. I kid. He was on his iPhone. There you have it. Segall. We did it. Sundays with Segall. We'll try to bring that back next Sunday, and I'll try to get it to you on Sunday as well, and maybe have a different guest in conversation on Monday. What do you think of that? Is it too much? Can we do it? I love these conversations. I love taping them. It's work to edit them and get them posted, of course. I can't do it without your support. So subscribe at patreon.com/Pete Dominic right now. You can also always pay more in your monthly subscription. Credit cards do expire at the end of the month. I always lose a few at the end of the month as a result. So please check your statement and make sure that you're still paying for the show. That often happens. And I noticed it happened just this past month, which just began. I hope you're having a good one. I love you. I appreciate you. I hope to see you at tonight's Hangout at 8 East. JohnCarroll.org. Support him and go buy his music. You bumblebees are the best. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Boy, you better stand up.